Hey everybody, I'm here. Good to see you. Special edition Courtroom Insider. Little early tonight. Just walked in the door from Caldwell, Idaho, which is about 4.5 hours from our studio. Uh, about 5 minutes ago, came in, and thanks to the help of Jordan, we are here. I couldn't wait any longer to bring you this interview with Special Agent Doug Hart with the FBI. No longer with the FBI. He retired about 2 years ago. Now he's the chief deputy for the Canyon County Sheriff's Office in Caldwell. And he's one of the many people I wanted to speak with in connection to this case, and finally made it happen. Jordan and I drove out to Caldwell, had an interview that was about 80 minutes long, and I'm going to play it for you here in just a second. One of the fascinating things I did not know before this interview is that Doug Hart worked on the case of Shasta Groney and Dylan Groney, her brother, back in the mid-2000s. I remember this case. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I had just started working in news when this happened. I was a brand new reporter, and a little girl and a little boy vanished from their home, and their parents and I believe one other person were found dead, were killed, and the kids were gone. And the story is just chilling. And so we talked a little bit about that in our conversation at the end, along with his involvement in Daybell, everything that he witnessed. You know, he was the guy that went through Lori's iCloud account. Imagine going through that entire iCloud account. He talks about the extensiveness of it and all of the other things that he did with the case. So let me know where you're watching from. This is a longer interview, but I'm going to jump right to it. And I'll see you on the other side. Let's hope that this works. Hi, everybody. I'm Nate Eaton here with the Chief Deputy for the Canyon County Sheriff's Office, Doug Hart. If you follow the Daybell case, okay, we don't have sound. I think you could hear it, but you couldn't. I don't think you could hear it. I think you could see it, but you couldn't hear it. I'm just gonna click this one button here, and hopefully you can play it. Just 1 minute. That's the ultimate tease. We just finished editing this, so it's still processing. Just 1 minute. Jordan to the rescue. He's coming right now to fix the sound from the computer. Doug Hart, thank you, Jordan. He's going to let us know when this will work. When I hit to go to play the video, there's no sound here. It comes out of that side, but not this side. So take over. Let me see if this works. Normally it pops up on that. Doug Hart has worked for the FBI, very extensive career, I believe nearly 30 years, and he has done several cases. And, he testified not only in Chad Daybell's trial twice, he testified in Lori Vallow's trial as well. And as I mentioned, he went through the hard drive belonging to Lori Vallow, and he went through the so much more evidence, supervised all of the FBI guys. He was on the ground the day that J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan's remains were found at Chad Daybell's house, and really was instrumental in this entire investigation. I want to let you know, I don't know if it has anything to do with this button over here, Jordan. I want to let you know, too, that I've reached out to other people, and later on this week, I'm going to try it again. Go ahead. Nothing yet. Other people involved in the case, including Is that the issue? Including Nick Edwards with the Attorney General's office, Ingrid Beatty with the Attorney General's office also. She was the prosecutor.
Both Chad and Lori Daybell's
Hey, we got it. Okay, I'm going to quit talking. Well, you're going to hear me keep talking, but on another video in a different shirt. Here we go. Thank you, Jordan. Hi, everybody. I'm Nate Eaton here with the Chief Deputy for the Canyon County Sheriff's Office, Doug Hart. If you followed the Daybell case, you knew that he testified in both trials, both Chad and Lori Daybell's trial, in the capacity, I guess, as a retired FBI agent.
Correct.
I appreciate you talking with me today. Just so people understand why you're now the Sheriff's Office versus the FBI, talk me through what brought you here.
You bet. I spent 27 years with the FBI in various assignments. I was involved in the Daybell case in my capacity as what they called the supervisory senior resident agent, which is a mouthful, but it basically means that I was in charge for the criminal programs for the FBI for the southern 34 counties of Idaho, which included a satellite office in Pocatello. But as I was moving towards the end of my FBI career, the Canyon County Sheriff called and offered me a position to be his chief. He and I had a long association for many years, and so the timing was right, and so I accepted that position. Love law enforcement, wanted to stay in law enforcement, and this was an opportunity to serve in a different capacity, so I made the move about 2 years ago.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go back to 2019, I imagine, is when you first became aware of the two missing kids, JJ and Tylee.
Yes.
Is that what started the FBI's involvement into all of it?
Yes. So I got a phone call, I believe it was November 27th of 2019. It was after the Rexburg Police Department had done their welfare check and subsequent search warrant and found the apartment had been abandoned. And some of our agents who work with the Rexburg Police Department, our Pocatello office agents, had been in contact with the Rexburg Police Department, and we indicated that there was a need for us to be involved due to the potential of two missing children.
What do you think when you get that call or that email? What's the first thing that goes through your mind?
Well, you just don't know very much at that point. And so that phone call, the agents who had responded were very concerned. They said, this is really strange, and we can't account for the whereabouts of these two children. And so when you get something like that, there are a number of steps that you take in terms of a missing child case and protocols to follow, and so that's what we initiated. So at the onset, I didn't, I had no idea, no concept of what we were about to get into, but knew what steps we needed to take as far as the FBI is concerned in arranging to work cooperatively with our state and local partners in a case where kids were missing.
So that was the end of December. You said the 27th?
Of November.
End of November.
It was the day before Thanksgiving.
Okay, day before Thanksgiving. And at what point does your involvement as far as like boots on the ground, letting the public know that these kids are missing? I mean, there's a series of steps you take, and I guess you just start working through those steps.
Immediately. Our involvement began immediately. So we opened a case under a classification for kidnapping, which is the federal nexus to this. And then our agents began participating very quickly with Rexburg Police Departments, interviewing, Ian Pulowski, Melanie Boudreau, anybody that's what you start is you start examining every potential avenue that might generate information to indicate the whereabouts of those children. So this case concurrently had just a massive number of tasks being performed by a wide variety of people. So that's how you initiate that process. So you don't do one thing at a time. There's probably 10 or 15 things going on all at the same time by different personnel.
So you do those interviews, and you hear, from what I recall, it was Ian Pulowski when he kind of came in and said, I married my new wife, and the night of our honeymoon, of our wedding, she says all this stuff about
Right.
light, dark, zombies, spirits. I would imagine that raised some alarm bells.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. That was very important information that he provided, and agreed to cooperate with us in making some recordings, which were very valuable in establishing some of the doctrinal foundations, and you know, it wasn't the smoking gun. It didn't say, you know, none of those recordings said what had happened to the children or where they were or who had done anything or if in fact anything had been done. But we were able to ascertain the sort of the, I don't want to say philosophy, but sort of where we got insight into the inner circle, that I guess is the word I would use, from those recordings, and it solidified that there was something going on here with these people. It didn't tell us what had happened to the children, but clearly we had a group that was cooperating with each other.
Did you think the kids were alive?
In those situations, you have to proceed with that hope and as if they are alive until proven otherwise. There's a lot of situations where a child goes missing where I think you're crestfallen and you feel like this isn't going to end well, but you have to believe, because sometimes miracles happen, and sometimes you know they're recovered.
Right.
Sometimes you find them. I wasn't an active participant, but our division handled the Elizabeth Smart case. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget a year after her disappearance when it was announced that she had been located.
Right.
And so those stories are real. Those things exist, and so you have to proceed as if those kids are alive, and it's your job to find them, and that is a tremendous. It gives a tremendous sense of urgency to everyone who's working on the case.
So word gets out, or you or Rexburg PD, I believe, release the news release. Mm-hmm. These kids are missing. Parents are in Hawaii, mm-hmm. or not cooperating with investigators. What's happening behind the scenes up in those 2 or 3 months? What can you tell us before Lori's arrested?
Yeah.
While they're still over there on the beach, I imagine you all are strategizing, trying to figure out which approach to take.
Well, we're actively working the case on multiple fronts. So a number of interviews are being conducted by the Rexburg Police Department, the FBI, the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. We're following up on leads and tips that are coming both outside of the state and inside the state, so we had to follow up on all of those things. A number of search warrants were obtained for phone numbers and Google, and we had the iCloud account that had been secured in Arizona, so we had a copy of that we were reviewing. We had our CAST analyst initiate his work to try to track phones, and a massive financial investigation, right, which is huge just in and of itself. And so all of those things are happening concurrently and progressing at different speeds, as we move forward. The arrest, you mentioned the arrest of Lori Vallow, that was critical in that we felt, because they were completely uncooperative. Nobody would talk to us in that inner circle. So we were looking very hard to find a mechanism, a charge, something that would give us a little bit of traction to see if we could get a reaction or a response from either Chad Daybell or Lori Vallow. And ultimately, Rob Wood, very forward-thinking, really devoted, dedicated prosecutor, all of them were, but he came up with that idea of, I've got a way that we can, there's a legitimate crime that we've identified, and we can move forward with a charge.
Once she was arrested, did you expect her then to cooperate?
Well, we had hoped that that would be the case. Typically, when someone is charged, they get legal counsel. And then you can work with their legal counsel under established parameters to determine, is this person willing to cooperate? What might we be able to do to resolve this matter? If the kids are safe and well, then let's just find that out and move forward. But absent some sort of legal process, we didn't think we were going to get there.
So she's then arrested, and I remember around the time, maybe she had already been arrested or around that week, the FBI, to me, took the unusual step of putting out a news release asking for photos and videos from Yellowstone National Park. I don't know if I'd ever seen anything like that. I'm sure it's happened, but and there was a specific website where people could go and upload their photos and videos.
Yeah.
Was the investigation at that point leading toward Yellowstone?
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah. And we were wrong on that. But we had worked very hard to try to identify a point in time that was our last known verifiable time that both of those children were alive. And we had various ways to do that. But through the iCloud, we had photos and videos that were dated, so we knew as of certain dates that Tylee and JJ were both alive. And then we looked, okay, what beyond that date can we find? And so we were able to establish what we believe was the last known sightings of both of those children, independent of one another. With Tylee, we had these photographs and videos that were taken around the Old Faithful site in Yellowstone. But as we tracked the travel of Alex and Lori and JJ and Tylee that day, we had some video of them arriving at the park, but it doesn't clearly show everybody who's in the truck. Right. And then we could see their travel throughout the park. And we had no idea if Tylee left the park alive. We knew she was at a certain place in the park at a certain time, and that's what we knew. And so then we could see additional travel and then exiting, and there was some strange deviations on the way back home as well. And so, it's an enormous national park,
right,
with lots of animals and lots of
hot geysers
and remote places. And so we spent a lot of time coordinating with the park authorities, and we had actually made arrangements to go into the park before it opened the next season to conduct a pretty massive, what was being prepped for a pretty massive search operation inside Yellowstone.
Wow.
Fortunately, we didn't have to do that. But it's a great demonstration of the complexity of this case. I mean, it's just that single piece, that one undertaking. It would have been unimaginable, to most people, how much effort that takes to contemplate searching an area that size, given the information that we had.
I can't even imagine. I mean, yeah, that would have taken forever. So do you think that they maybe had planned to do something with the children in the park?
No.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
They just went up there to sightsee?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then of course we know that within a day or two, Tylee was disposed of in Chad's backyard,
Mm-hmm.
and then JJ a few weeks later. Where were you on June 9th of 2020
I was there.
at the property?
Yeah.
And did you think that morning that you would find those kids that day?
You know, there was so much back and forth amongst the investigative team. I felt very, very comfortable that we had established sufficient probable cause to get the search warrant. And as this was the 2 days of the search were the culmination of months of effort. And to me, that search sort of encapsulates what this case was all about in terms of all of the different efforts that had been made by everyone involved in the case that led up to us locating the children. There's no one person, no one event that can claim sole ownership for this is what got us here. So, you know, we had done interviews. We had done our initial cast analysis, which showed Alex on the property on certain dates. But showing Alex on the property is meaningless unless you correspond that with the last known sightings of JJ and Tylee. So that's a critical piece. We've got to find out, when's the last time we saw Tylee or JJ alive? Oh, we have this date now. This date becomes important to us. So we have a piece of a timeline. Then we have an analysis of phones that corresponds with visits to the property and this timeline we've been establishing. Then we're analyzing dozens and dozens of electronic devices, phones, computers, things that were seized in the January search warrant. So you have this search warrant that had occurred almost 6 months previously. We're still in the process of culling through all of this massive amount of electronic data. And you can't just do a keyword search. You know the text I'm talking about, right? No keyword would have caught that. But what does that tell us? Well, we have a cast analysis, we have a last known sighting of Tylee alive, and now we have a text message from Chad to his wife that explains why he's burning and digging on the property the very next day after the last known sighting of Tylee alive. So all of these pieces from all of these people working together fit into place. So that puzzle begins to be built. And then you say, okay, this is really compelling. Let's apply for a search warrant. So no, I didn't know. It seemed kind of incredulous to me that they, of all the places in southeastern Idaho, that you would put bodies there. But I was pretty confident. We located JJ's grave very quickly, very early on in the search, and so it was a very interesting, kind of a compelling moment. You were taken aback that he's actually here.
Were you right there? Where were you on the property? Were you assigned a task?
So yes, we knew the two spots that we were going to concentrate on, but we initially walked the entire property. So the search is conducted by the FBI's evidence response team, but it's a massive property, and so they're the experts, but they also task out law enforcement officers of, hey, do this, do that. I had had some previous experience working violent crimes on Indian reservations, and part of that training is actually identifying clandestine grave sites.
Right.
And so, as myself and another Indian country agent walked the property, we knew both of us had been to this school. There are certain things that you look for if you're trying to identify a potential clandestine grave, and we saw that pretty quickly.
Right where JJ was.
Right where JJ was buried. Yeah.
And that was one of the spots where Alex's phone had been.
Yeah, his phone had been there, but you could see very clearly the vegetation was different in a specific shape. And when you got down on your hands and knees and looked, you could feel a seam. And then as soon as we peeled back that first layer of sod, you could see that all of the roots from that tree that was right there had been clipped. I knew that, I didn't know we had JJ, but I knew something man-made, somebody had taken the sod up and cut the roots. And we have these probing rods, and you could probe the soil around JJ's grave, but could not. And unbeknownst to me, there's rocks and a board over the body, and that's what the probes were hitting.
Unbelievable. Wow. So once you realize it is him, I'm sure every sort of emotion you can imagine.
Yeah. It was, well, you're heartbroken as a parent,
Right.
as a human being, and we didn't know. Have you seen the autopsy photos?
I did in the first trial.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you're exhuming a grave, you're not examining, like you're just getting it out so that you can get it to the coroner's office. So we, at that point, I didn't have.
You know the condition of the body.
No,
Yeah.
we knew. We cut very slightly into the plastic to verify that it was human remains versus something else, because we needed to take immediate action. And so that's all we did. So we just knew that he was wrapped in plastic garbage bags at that point, but we knew it was him. Mm-hmm. We knew we'd found him. And so there's a sense of relief. Months of work have led the combined work of all these good people have led us to this point. Tremendous sadness. And then, you have a duty to perform. And so there's more work to be done. Lots more work to be done. And so, that involved getting Chad into custody immediately, which we were set up to do. And then we still had another full day and a half. As I said, we found JJ in the morning, and then we had started locating remains for Tylee later that afternoon, but Tylee's burial site was much, much more difficult to excavate, and then just it involved very painstaking sifting and digging, and so it was 2 long days.
I know, maybe I'm just asking you to put on your guessing hat here. Why do you think they did what they did to Tylee versus JJ?
My personal opinion is that they had never disposed of a body, and so I think in their mind, if we burn it, we're going to get rid of the evidence, and they had no idea the amount of heat and flame and time that it takes to consume a human body. So I think that was an error on, it was a mistake in their judgment that they thought, we'll just bring her out here and we'll burn the body and poof, all of the evidence will be gone. And then they found out very quickly that that's why crematoriums work the way they do,
Right.
And so I think it was a failure on their part. And then they had to come up with a plan B, which was to, dismember and then bury the various parts. So I think they knew the first experience was a catastrophe for them, And so they did it differently the second time.
Much less labor intensive and
Yeah.
get it done. So then you have a whole new part of the investigation because you found the children. You have both suspects in custody. And one of your main parts of the investigation was to go through Lori's iCloud. Tell everybody so that we get an understanding. Like you said a second ago, it's not like you're doing a keyword for children or raccoon or whatever. It's not that. What are you doing to go through her iCloud? How big was the iCloud?
Massive. So we have some software that will take the iCloud and arrange it into its component parts. For instance, your contacts. So there will be a list of contacts, voicemail messages, photographs, videos, text messages, media messages, chats, emails, cookies, Bluetooth. I mean, and so you take each of those components and you'd go through those. Some didn't take very long, but a lot of them. The only parameters we would put is we knew when Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow met. So we didn't look too far prior to that date.
Right.
And so that enabled us with one of the accounts to limit the parameters, because you had 15,000 photographs. It's a big number to go
do you
through.
have to click on each one?
Yes.
Click,
yeah.
exit,
yes.
click. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And then videos, thousands of videos and thousands of text messages. And then you had thousands of chats. Well, within a chat, a single chat could contain several thousand text messages.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
And so it was just this painstaking process of attention to detail and going through literally line by line for every single message and pulling out those ones that were relevant to the case.
And saving those.
Yes.
And then I guess, would you get together with the other investigators and discuss them? Like, is this one relevant? Is this one not? Or
Not so much, because that was kind of everybody had a bunch of different assignments, and so the iCloud was what I was primarily working on from an investigative function. And so we would share those things, and we had a lot of discussions about relevancy. There's a lot of the iCloud that was relevant that we didn't use just because there was so much material. I think we used the stuff that was deemed to be most important to the case. But that, yeah, so it was just in today's world, with all of the digital records that exist, it's a painstaking process to get through an iCloud that has data going back years and years and years.
there's several texts that you testified to in both trials that were brought up, turning up the heat on the inflicting pain on the kids. The raccoon text that came out during the trial, the storm text, of course, that came out. Were there any that, as you're going through them, that really just like kind of hit you like, whoa?
Yeah, I mean, two primarily. A series of texts. The first was when they started talking about death percentages. And they're talking about real people who have died. And it was very clear to me from the verbiage that was used as it relates to JJ. He's barely in his body. He's partway through the veil. Those kinds of things. We knew they were talking about the deaths of these children. At least that's my belief. And then secondly, that the text that I think is most pertinent is, Lori's question to Chad: is there a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children? She's asking about their deaths, their murders. I don't know, and we're not looking at these texts in a vacuum. We're looking at the texts in conjunction with the totality of the investigation that everybody's been working on. And so we know from the interviews of Melanie Gibb and some of these other people, some of the Zulema, and so we knew about the dark entities and the castings and all of those different things. We knew the children had been murdered. So if you know the children have been murdered and you're seeing messages like that, then it adds context and meaning to those messages that you might not have had if we didn't have the children located in the state that they were in.
What was some other stuff that maybe didn't make it into the trial that you found interesting that was on the cloud?
Oh, there was tons of stuff about the religious philosophies, and we debated and had a lot of discussions about how far into this do we go, how important is this to a jury to understand, what's behind this. And who's to say how much they actually believe this stuff.
Right. Just that they consider themselves gods, goddesses, a lot of talk like that, or?
Yeah, again, these are personal opinions, but my view is that Chad Daybell used this as a way to inflate his ego and to manipulate Lori, and you saw that at the trial. Lori manipulated him with sex, and he manipulated her with his supposed status as a visionary or a prophet or whatever you may want to, or he may want to call himself. But as you looked at the doctrines or whatever you want to call it that they were espousing, you could see that it was done to accomplish certain things and to justify certain actions that are not justifiable at all. And so that was the back and forth of, well, how much of this do we introduce to show, people have a freedom of religion, of course. We're not judging their religious beliefs, but when you see them take something like that and twist it around to make murder seem like you're doing the person a favor by setting them free, look at the Tammy text. Right. Tammy's in limbo. She's very frustrated. She, makes it look like they're doing Tammy Daybell a favor.
Right.
So yeah, those are the things that the jury didn't see. There was so much of it. You couldn't include all of it.
Wow.
And so we tried to make sure that we presented the jury with sufficient information for them to deliberate and make their decisions. But the trial would have been days longer if we really would have included all of that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Were some of the conversations nauseating? Lovey-dovey?
Yeah, yes, but again, you're performing a task that's important, and so those kinds of things kind of you read them, you passed over them, and you got back to looking for what's really relevant.
Had the iCloud not been enabled, how detrimental would that have been to the case?
That's a good question. I think the iCloud played an important part. I think we still would have ended up in the same place to some extent. In both trials, I was the one of the final witnesses, right. and we were very careful to abide by all the court's rules. So I haven't seen anybody else's testimony.
Still haven't gotten back to watch. Not
No.
interested?
I'm busy.
You have time, yeah, right.
I don't have time. So, it's funny because the perspective I have is my perspective,
Right.
because the prosecutors and the other witnesses, we were all very, very cautious and cognizant not to talk about our testimony, not to listen or watch, so I get the newspaper every single day. I didn't read not once did I read an article about the case. I didn't look. So my friends, my family had a much better view the full picture of the case. So it's hard for me to answer that question because I didn't get to see the content of the other witnesses' testimony. I mean, I know it from, I've read the interview reports and those kinds of things as part of preparing for the trial, but it would have been much harder without those communications. I think the communications between Chad and Lori are very important.
You mentioned working with all these other agencies. Are you all having meetings and saying, all right, we're here?
Yep. We met every month, sometimes more than once a month in person for multiple days. We would have tasks that were assigned to people, and they would report their progress on their various tasks, and we would just sort of chart our progress, and we would wait for things to be done. It takes time because, let me give you just an example. So if I'm remembering correctly, the phone with the text message about the raccoon, I want to say that phone had 54,000 text messages. And you got to... So it's not like you get through that in a day. You have to... And I think that's the only text we pulled out of that whole thing. And so it takes a long time to get through all of these things, and all of the journals and everything that was seized during the search warrants that were served. And so as we would meet each month, it was great. It was this, and I know others you've talked to have repeated this, but it truly was a group effort. There were people involved, from the Madison County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. There was somebody who had to keep track of all of our discovery, every document, every photograph, every search warrant. All of that had to be provided, to the defense at some point in time once charges were made. And so there terabytes worth of information that we were accumulating, tracking, and then ultimately had to provide. And so as we progressed, we had a delay because of COVID, but ultimately we set a grand jury date, and that grand jury date was almost a year after we found the children. Grand jury is a secret proceeding. We can't really talk about the contents of that, but that was a multi-day event with a lot of witnesses that appeared and testified in front of the grand jury, and the grand jury ultimately issued an indictment. So,
and up until a few weeks before Lori's trial in 2023, this case was combined. It was always the two of them. And I think one of the questions a lot of people have still to this day is, who was leading who, Chad or Lori? After your investigation, do you think one was in charge of the other, or not in charge, but leading the other?
I think that role probably switched back and forth. I think that Chad Daybell played a leadership role in this. I think that's pretty well established, that he was the source that all of these people would go to for answers to their questions. If you look at the trial testimony, you'll see that these inquiries were made to Chad Daybell, seeking answers. And so I believe he had a leadership role, but certainly, Lori was fully in line with that, and the outcome. There was no hesitation on her part. In fact, the opposite many times. She was very impatient for them to get to where they ultimately wanted to be, living their fantasy life on an island.
Right. What did you think when those trials were severed?
I was, that's a decision that the judge makes for reasons that he evaluated. So, it's not my place to, to have any criticisms there. I was disappointed. I wanted to see them tried. It's a conspiracy. I wanted to see them tried together as co-conspirators.
Right.
But, once it was severed, we just said, okay, it's severed, and let's focus on one trial at a time.
Were you surprised Chad Daybell got death penalty?
No, I wasn't.
Do you think Lori would have?
Probably. But again, I don't get too... We're the fact finders. You know,
Right.
we do the investigation and we participate clearly in that trial process, but a lot of those decisions are kind of in the hands of other people as to why they're pursuing those courses and those charges, and our job is just to conduct the highest quality investigation that we can and provide our findings to the prosecutors, who then evaluate those findings for the appropriate legal actions.
Right.
Yeah.
What's one or two things that you learned doing this whole thing for the past 4.5 years?
There's a lot of great people out there. I hadn't worked... In my capacity, I covered 34 counties. I couldn't possibly meet... There's well over 100 different law enforcement agencies in those 34 counties. So I hadn't met or interacted with the Rexburg Police Department or the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. I had, to a limited degree, with the Attorney General's office, but just the quality, the character of the people who were involved in this case gives you some pride in this profession, and that there are a lot of people who will give their all and then some to see a case to its conclusion, despite the setbacks and despite the difficulties and the hardships. And we had plenty of obstacles that we encountered during the course of this investigation. So I think that's one of the things that stood out to me, was just these cases tear your heart out. Over the course of a career, I think you accumulate some baggage. These kinds of cases add to that baggage. But what I've also found is, in those cases that require the most of you, that require you to give the most of yourself, those are the cases where, when you look back, those bonds that you've forged with the people that were shoulder to shoulder with you in bringing the case to a conclusion, those are meaningful. The harder the case, the more meaningful those associations become. So that was special. And then I just the opportunity to help the FBI. This is what we specialize in terms of long-term, complex, multi-subject cases. And so the lion's share of the investigative work was done by Fremont County and Rexburg Police Department, but we were with them and helped them and helped navigate how do we organize this monster of a case, and how do we account for all of the leads and discovery and everything that we need to produce at the end of the day. And so the FBI had a role to play that was complemented well by the work that was being done by Rexburg PD and the AG's office and Fremont County, and then ultimately Social Security and others who were brought into the case.
Do you have any thoughts on what happened to Tammy? I mean, we know how she died, asphyxiation, but was it Chad? Was it Alex?
I have some thoughts. I probably just... I don't want to speculate on that. I mean,
right.
I have some thoughts, but I'm glad that they came to that the medical examiners arrived at that conclusion, because I think it's clear that's what that was.
Right.
And so that was important to finally have that piece, that report was important, and that was almost a year after the fact that we waited for that conclusion.
Big development
Yeah.
from them. What about Alex? I mean, do you think, again, this is me asking you to speculate, if he was still alive Do you think he maybe would have turned on Chad and Lori? You think he would have gone all the way? We've had 3 trials.
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, it really, it depends on how he viewed his situation and what was. I can tell you this: the more people there are involved in the conspiracy, the more likely you are to get somebody to cooperate.
Interesting, yeah. Especially, I would think, when you've got a couple and then a third outsider.
Right.
That outsider, I would imagine, would be more likely to
Yeah.
turn unless one of the lovers feels jilted or something.
Yeah.
So, I know early on you wanted to talk to Chad and Lori. All the investigators did. Do you have any desire to at this point?
At this point, no. I have no use to speak with either of them.
You think you'd get anything out of them?
No. As an investigator, as an interviewer, I would have wanted a crack at an interview prior to.
Right.
But after the fact, no. I don't need any. I wouldn't need any association or conversations with them.
Right. So what is that first day back in the office after the trial like?
Inbox is full, and
Yeah, a lot of emails.
and there's the world keeps turning. It's you take a moment to be grateful. Really, in my case, grateful for the work of the jury. I will tell you, again. In Lori's trial, I was, I think, the second to the last witness, so I had really no optics in what was going on in that trial. And I testified twice in Chad's trial, but as we were allowed to go in for the closing arguments, there were 3 jurors from Lori's trial who were there that I'd never met. They introduced themselves, and I had a chance to visit with them. And that it's so rare. I've been doing this for 29 years. I can think of one other trial where I had a member of the jury call me to visit one time in my entire career. So witnesses, law enforcement officers, and juries, there's a gigantic wall in between them. And so to have the opportunity to visit with a couple of the jurors on Lori's case, and to hear, for us, we have a duty to perform, and you see these horrible things, and you've got to figure out, okay, how do I move forward? And there's a lot of power in being an advocate for someone who no longer has a voice. And that's what we are. So when Tylee and JJ and Tammy can no longer speak for themselves, that's how I view it, is that we're there, we become their advocate to seek whatever justice there might be for them. And that helps you deal with what you have to deal with. The jury is a little bit of a different story. And so I felt, at the conclusion, I felt very grateful for their service, how long of a trial that was. I knew what they had to see, which is not part of the normal course of human life to see those things. And it just felt it felt good that it's not over. It's never, there's going to be appeal after appeal, and there's other things going on in Arizona, but for nearly 5 years we had been working on this case, and that's a long time. And so to have 2 trials of that length and complexity, to have 2 different juries come back with their findings, it felt good to be part of that effort, to be one of those people who played some small role in being an advocate for those people whose lives were taken from them. And so, for me, it was that's why I love this profession. is that we can serve our community in that way, and that was primarily how I felt, was just grateful to have been able to be one of those people who got to, I don't want to say got to, but who was called upon to participate in a case of this nature, and to see it through, just to finish it.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, thank you for your work, for doing it.
You're welcome.
All righty. Big thanks to Doug Hart. So many of you asking about the picture over his shoulder. Did you see that? The drawing that his son did? It's right over here. Dear Dad, I hope you catch the bad guys. Love, Jake. I noticed that when I walked into his office, one of the first things I saw was that sign over his right shoulder. And it was great talking with him, spending some time with him in his office, and obviously you can hear what this case did. Now, tomorrow, the rest of the interview about Shasta and Dylan Groney. Tomorrow, 4 o'clock Mountain Time. I have more to share with you. We just got back from Boise. I went and visited Chad Daybell. Well, not him, where he's staying. I went to the prison, and the maximum security prison. And tomorrow I want to show you the facility, talk about what life is like for him in that facility, the death row inmates who he's sharing his, the row with, the unit with, and what life is like for him. Also, I have some things I want to share from Ingrid Beatty, the Attorney General prosecutor who helped in the case. I have something I want to share from the Attorney General investigation, Nick Edwards, the investigator. Very touching. He actually gave me permission that I'll share with you tomorrow, his journal entry from the day that JJ and Tylee were found. What he wrote in his journal that night, sitting in a hotel room in Rexburg. I'll share that with you tomorrow. And also, Lindsay Blake has confirmed she will do an interview with me. We're in the process of setting that up. That won't be tomorrow. Well, maybe tomorrow during the day, but it won't be tomorrow during Courtroom Insider. So there's a bunch of stuff I want to share with you tomorrow. I can't tonight because I got to get home because we have something going on tonight. That's why we came on earlier, or I came on earlier today than normal 6:30 time. But big thanks to Doug Hart for sitting down and talking with me. Tomorrow you'll hear part 2 of our interview. He talks a little bit more about the Daybell case. He talks a little bit more about the Shasta Groney case. Joseph Duncan, the man who abducted and killed her family and tortured her at a campsite in Montana. It was a Denny's waitress who saved the day, who saved this little girl. I'll get Doug Hart to talk about that tomorrow, and then a bunch of other stuff to talk about with Daybell. So thank you so much for watching. Apologies for being on late. Tomorrow, 4 o'clock Mountain Time, we'll go through this. And then, of course, if you miss, I know many of you are saying, oh, it's too early, I can't do that. Don't worry. Once we start, you can go back and rewind, or you can watch it after the fact. All right. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great night. See you back here tomorrow.